Magical things happen. The internet sends bits around. There it is. So, yes, look at all that. Hooray! Welcome to the ASPNET Community Stand-Up.
How's everybody doing?
Yeah. I'm doing good. So, so we have the Preview 7 show. We got Brady. We got Dan Roth on. It's exciting. Hi. Yeah. Yep. Just to be sure that all the technical stuff worked, we started the stream 15 minutes early, and so we've already got tons of people that have been watching and chatting away. So that's exciting. Mm-hmm. I cannot wait to see all the cool stuff you're going to show off, so I'm going to jump right into the community links to get those done. Cool. So I'm going to share my screen here.
Let me go to Teams for you. There we go.
Okie doke. Excellent. Okay. So this one's fun. This is from Andrew Locke. He's been doing a series. This is part 5 of this series. This is a really interesting topic, I think. So the problem is that you have these IDs that are often integers, and it's very easy to write a method that, say, it takes in a user ID and an order ID and a product ID. And if you type those in the wrong order, they're all ints, and so there's no way to validate what's happening. And it'd be nice if you could actually, on a class, you could say this ID is a product ID. Unfortunately, it's not really super easy to do, especially if you worry about things like JSON deserialization and stuff like that. So Andrew had gone through and he created some things with, like some snippets and ways that you could you could do all this, but it was a decent amount of code. And so then what's really cool is he's actually created a strongly typed ID NuGet package. And using Roslyn magic, it's actually doing the stuff behind the scenes. So here I've got a strongly typed ID attribute on my foo ID class, and it can actually go through and validate exactly what, it can validate the IDs and stuff. So behind the scenes, it's generating code, but I don't have to see it. And it's it's automatically on build generating the correct code for that. This also handles out the JSON deserialization stuff, so JSON converters and all that. So I think this is really neat. I really like this idea, and again, this gives you the whole ability to validate that you've got. If I've got a product and I've got a product ID, I can, behind the scenes, my entity framework model is still just saving it to an integer field, but I'm getting that kind of build time validation. So
it's all done at build time. With the code, it's like code genning a bunch of stuff.
It's code genning.
Sweet. Yeah.
Isn't that wonderful? I love this. And so there's stuff potentially on the way for C# with record types and stuff, but it's I forget even if it's approved or if it's a way out. So some other languages have this, where you can have opaque types, I believe is the feature name. We don't have that in C# yet. This kind of gives you a way to simulate that.
Like it's sort of meta programming the compiler. Is that what this is doing? Like it's going in and saying, let me extend Roslyn a little bit to do some cool stuff for me.
Yeah,
That's
so
cool.
it's using this .NET Code Gen, and so he also points out this .NET CLI tool reference being phased out in Core 3, and I'm not sure exactly what that is. I haven't looked into that more, but that is also something to be aware of. But so this NuGet package is just generating the stuff for you, and he's got some extra configuration options for you too, like if you want a JSON converter and stuff. So neat. Okay, Shahed, absolute champ of blogging lately. So he's finished up his 26 A through Z series of ASP.NET Core, and he's got this ebook available. This is actually really cool too, because he's got this behind the scenes, this whole worker service that takes all his blog posts and generates this ebook. So that's pretty neat too. He's actually generating this ebook too. So anyhow, great stuff. Love it. And he's been doing this thing where he's been digging into all these different features, like X is for XML, or K is for Kestrel or whatever, and then he's updated them too. So he's going through and making them update.
There we go. Sorry about that.
Cool.
Thanks, guys.
All right. No worries. Okay. Great. Okay, Jim Bach. This is cool. This post, and Jim Bach's on the live stream too, which is neat. So here he's talking about the ASP.NET Core request pipeline. This is part 1 of the series, and here he's looking at receiving requests. I like this, just kind of how he's describing the different options, server implementations, and what you can do. Kestrel, out of process, in process. Love his diagrams here, and then of course a handy TLDR down at the bottom talking about what are your options and when you'd pick which. So nice post. I'm looking forward to reading the rest of the series. Okay, this is cool. Scott Addy recently posted this on Twitter, so I followed through to read up on this. So there's been this HTTP REPL. Here's, I guess, the actual release of it. There's documentation of the HTTP REPL, in the docs, and also, it's moved. I believe before it was in the labs or something.
Correct.
It was yeah. Okay, so this is moved over into the HTTP, into the ASP.NET org.
Right.
Anything else?
It has its own repo now, and we're going to be adding some stuff to it. We have a lot of ideas on how to make use of this, maybe from VS or like an F5 type of experience. If you have any thoughts on that, feel free to submit us some issues and give us some ideas on either how you've used it or features that you want in it.
Very cool. All right. So this is a cool one, Brady, that you sent over to me. So Jiva's written up this real-time Blazor tic-tac-toe with bots and multiplayer and SignalR, and even when you load this page, it does some neat little whoop,
that's cool
animation stuff. Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, so you sent me this link. I mean, it looks pretty straightforward. It looks really interesting. Anything else you wanted to add on here?
I mean, I like this because Glenn and I had worked on a demo for Dev Intersection, and right before it, we had started. It was a game demo, and we had kind of started working on it, thinking we would do SignalR, and then we kind of went messaging nuts, and we started using Service Bus and a bunch of other stuff. And we talked about it the other day and reviewed this article, and we like this better. So I think we might re-architect a little bit and kind of do the player versus player components. But I really like this sample a lot. I would definitely take a peek at it. I'd like to see this put in a Kubernetes cluster and like have other bots. So maybe bots. You could write your own bot and come up with your own algorithm to beat the human, so to speak. So see if we could actually make this into some sort of a viral game. I'd love to talk to Jiva and see if we could do something with it.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Had a question in the chat about posting the links. I'll post all the links for these right after we go through them all. Mm-hmm. So, yep. Cool. All right. Ed Charbonneau sent me this. This is really neat. He's got, this is a Blazor quick start guide. These are all just short little 5-ish minute little kind of intro things. So just very quick start. Yeah. So tons of great content from Ed lately on Blazor stuff. He does a weekly stream on Twitch, and just like kind of community stand-up style on Fridays, just focused on Blazor. So lots of great stuff. Cool. Okay, Jeff Frett, speaking of the twitching, so Jeff went through 2 of our workshops, and so these were all live on Twitch, full day workshops, and then he posted the video for these. So this one is the Blazing Pizza, walkthrough of the Blazing Pizza tutorial.
Heard of that one?
Workshop. Yeah, you did. And
I remember that.
I love the look on his face here. I think this may be due to reading some of these different, some of the pizza descriptions, especially the Brit. There's some odd options there. But yeah. So this is cool. And then also here he did the ASP.NET Core 2.2 workshop. And so that is neat. If you would like to, we do these workshops at conferences. They're available online. They're actually in this presentations.netfoundation.org. If you want to go through them yourself, if you'd like a video tutorial and then to follow along with the code, you can do that. So that's all right here, and yeah, dig in. One other thing, just by the way, this ASP.NET Core App Workshop, the live version of this is 2.2, because that's the release version, but there is a branch with 3.0. So if you want to go through and do the 3.0 version of this, that's out there too. It's still kind of in process, but there is a version of it, and Damien and David did go through this at NDC Oslo. All right, now the excitement. ASP.NET Core, or excuse me, .NET Core 3.0 Preview 7. And then, yeah, and this
crowd goes wild.
And I will confess to have not read this post yet because you sent me the link to it like about a second before we went live.
It just got published. It's live now. Yes.
So exciting. So exciting. So all these links I'm going to, I will post the link for this, and this has all the links for the show, and I will stop with the sharing, and you can talk about the .NET Core Preview 7 once I find Teams. Come on, Teams. There we go. And stop sharing. Okay.
There we go.
Back over to you.
So let me get it. You got Teams up? Okay, good.
Yep.
Daniel?
Should I go? Me? My turn?
Your turn.
All right. So actually, let's look. I can share my screen, right? I can do that.
Yeah.
You can totally do
sharing
that.
thing.
Mhm.
I can do that. This thing. Did that work?
It did. It's on the way.
Can people see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm pulling up the .NET blog again because I haven't gone through it in detail as well, but I'm told that there is a bunch of awesomeness in here about like app size improvements. This one. .NET Core 3.0 with the I don't see .NET Core 3.0 Preview 7. There's like 2 blog posts. Oh, that's the NA Framework one. Okay, so we've got the .NET Core 3.0 Preview 7 blog post and the EF Core blog post that just came out as well. But I'm told that we did a whole bunch of work to like reduce the app size.
Mm-hmm. And we've added many event counters, which is exciting.
And that is all in here. Yeah, .NET Core SDK size improvements. So let's see what we got here. So installer size change. Minus 440 kilobytes here. That's a little not much smaller. This one is minus 55 megabytes, so 32% smaller. So this is just like the size of the SDK when you go to install it. And I think a lot of that work was that we removed a lot of the like offline package stores that were in here. Is that right?
I think so.
Changed the way they construct by removing the purpose-built packs of various kinds. In previous versions, we constructed the SDK from NuGet package, which included many artifacts that were not required and wasted a lot of space. You can see how we calculated these file sizes and the size improvement gist. Yeah, so I think the reason why this is exciting and good is because this presumably affects the size of our Docker images. Is that right? Yeah, so like these, like the Debian Docker image now is like half the size.
That's good.
And the Alpine one, like Alpine is like a tiny Linux distribution, right? Like, isn't it just like under 10 megs or something?
Yeah.
But because of all the stuff that we had to bring in with the SDK, like it just gets bloated, even though you're building on a really tiny OS. But we get a huge size improvement there. So this should make it easier to like move your containers around, copy things around, and you have a lot less stuff that you're having to worry about, like what is on your Docker images. So that's kind of cool. So the size improvements have landed in this release. So I just wanted to highlight that. Let's go look at the ASPNET blog and see what's new on the ASPNET side. So a couple things that you're going to want to know about Preview 7. So Preview 7 is actually now in the box with Visual Studio. So previously to this release, if you installed .NET Core 3.0, you were going to install Visual Studio, and you, of course, would be installing the preview channel of Visual Studio because you need the latest Visual Studio tooling to take advantage of all the stuff that's in .NET Core 3.0. There are, in fact, features that won't actually work unless you use the preview channel. We get quite a few issue reports from people who have tripped over that and tried to use .NET Core 3.0 with like the stable release of Visual Studio 2019. That's not a thing quite yet, but with this next update to Visual Studio, and I believe the update. I've been watching my. I don't know. No, definitely not rebooting right now. I've been watching my Visual Studio installer, waiting for bits to come in for the next update of Visual Studio. I believe Visual Studio 16. Like I have 16.1 installed right now, but I believe Visual Studio 16.2, update 2 to 2019, is landing like any minute. Like it should show up in the stable channel. You can see that preview 4 of 16.2 is showing up in my preview channel right now. But later today, I'm told that this will actually update to 16.3 Preview 1. And that's actually the version of Visual Studio that you're going to want to use with this Preview 7 release of .NET Core 3.0. Looks like it hasn't quite landed yet. I just installed Preview 4, and I'm not going to reboot because that would be worrisome to do that on a live stream. But you're going to want to make sure that you get 16.3 Preview 1, which should be in the preview channel any minute now. 16.2, the stable release, just should be going out any minute as well at about the same time. And 16.3, that's the release that we will support with .NET Core 3.0. So that's why you're going to want to be on that train. And the great news is that .NET Core 3.0 will actually be included in that Visual Studio release. If you've got 16.3, then you have .NET Core 3.0 and you're good to go. And you've got in fact, you'll have a .NET Core 3.0 version that's aligned with that VS version. This is one of the reasons why the schedule for .NET Core 3.0 will actually accelerate a little bit from now to the end of the release. We're targeting September for the final release of .NET Core 3.0, and all of the updates in between are actually aligned to Visual Studio and .NET Core 3.0 updates. So you'll get Preview 1 of 16.3. Hopefully today, and that will carry Preview 7 of .NET Core 3.0. And when Preview 8 comes out for .NET Core 3.0, that will be carried with Preview 2 of 16.3. So those two things are now locked together at the hip, and 16.3 will be the stable version of Visual Studio that you'll use with .NET Core 3.0. Does that make sense, everyone? That's what you're going to want to get. If you're not on the preview channel today, make sure you get on the preview channel so that you can get all the great new features in .NET Core 3.0. So what else? What is actually new then in this release? We are getting closer to the end of the .NET Core 3.0 train. I mean, we've only got about 2 more months, right, until the release goes out. So we're starting to dial back from major feature work and moving more towards stabilization, polish, making sure that everything is production ready and ready to go by the time we ship in September. So you may see that these releases don't have quite as much in terms of like brand new features that we've been pushing out. It's more tweaks and updates that are happening in the release. So a couple things that we did. So first of all, if you're a Blazor user, which I hope many of you are, there is a Blazor update that is that shipped alongside this release. There's support for Blazor server apps. That's, of course, in the box with .NET Core 3.0, and there's updates there. And then there's the support for Blazor WebAssembly apps, or client-side Blazor apps, as we've been calling them, that ships out of band on NuGet as a NuGet package. Now, in the past, if you wanted to get the latest, greatest Blazor WebAssembly templates into Visual Studio, you not only had to install the SDK, you also had to install a Visual Studio extension to get those templates into VS. You no longer need to do that with this release, which is pretty cool. So this is actually, I think, a pretty awesome thing, not just for Blazor, but for the .NET ecosystem in general. We've always had a mechanism at the command line where you can create template packs as a NuGet package and install them on the command line in order to get templates available from the CLI. That's what we've been doing with Blazor for a while, and lots of people have been shipping templates that way. But then if you wanted to make those templates available in Visual Studio, you had to do extra work. You had to create a Visual Studio extension so that Visual Studio knew about those templates. Visual Studio didn't just automatically figure out that, oh, there's some templates on the command line, I should expose those as well. You had to do extra work to create an extension. With this update to Visual Studio 16.3 Preview 1, there's now functionality in VS to detect new templates that are installed from the command line. So for the new Blazor templates, it's sufficient just to install them from the command line, and you'll get those templates now in Visual Studio. So that's pretty cool. If you're a template author, you have your own template packs online, hopefully that'll be a feature that you can also leverage, that people can get your templates not only on the command line, but also in Visual Studio by just running one command line command, and that'll be it.
One minor thing from the chat there, it looks like there's an extra dot at the end of that .NET new line.
Yeah, that someone put a period there, and that shouldn't be there. I will get that fixed. No problem. Thank you for pointing that out. Yes. If someone else wants to do that for me, that would be great. So just copy everything except for that last dot. So that'll get you set up then with all the bits, both on the command line and in VS. The upgrade of existing projects from if you're messing around with Preview 6 and you're going to Preview 7, it's actually pretty lightweight this time around. Not a lot of breaking changes between these two preview releases. Pretty much you're going to be updating package for, references for those very few cases where you still have those. One of the ways that we got that huge size savings in .NET Core 3.0 on the SDK size that we saw previously was we moved to this idea of a framework reference where all of ASP.NET Core is now just one big framework along with all the .NET Core stuff that you just get referenced implicitly by the fact that you're using the .NET Core SDK. So it should be pretty easy to get updated. There are some more changes that are coming in Preview 8, particularly in the Blazor space, so that's just something to be aware of. We are doing our API reviews right now, which means that we are going through all the APIs that we've generated over the year and a half of Blazor experimental development and just making sure that these are the APIs that we actually want to ship with. There are some things that are moving around. Some package names got shifted around as part of that work. That will be coming in Preview 8. So just heads up on that. If you're trying to use Blazor in any sort of production scenarios today, just be ready that there will be some churn that you'll have to react to for Preview 8. But after that, we should be pretty much locked down as it concerns APIs and having them be stable. Okay, so this is kind of cool. So if you're in Visual Studio now, and I have because it's not in the preview channel quite yet, and I don't want to restart, I do have an internal preview build of Visual Studio installed on my machine. So I'm going to do File New Project here. This is the internal build of 16.3 Preview 1. One thing that's really cool now is when you look at the templates, and I have a couple filters here. Let me remove the project type filter. Yeah, let's go look at all project types. So this is the File New Project dialog, which surfaces a nice long list of all the .NET templates that are available. In the past, if you wanted to do a new ASP.NET Core template, what you would select ASP.NET Core Web App Template and click Next. And then you'd say what template name you wanted. And then it would pop you into this additional dialog, which will show up in just a second, that had all of the ASP.NET Core specific templates in their own list. And this was fine. This enabled us to do a bunch of additional tooling around the ASP.NET Core templates, like having all these additional checkboxes and authentication options, which created some easier ways to get started. The downside of having this additional UI is it means that if you're trying to, let's say you wanted to create a Blazor app, a lot of people would go into this create new project dialog, and they'd type Blazor here and nothing would show up. But one of the things that we've done in 16.3 is we've now created placeholder templates in this UI so that all the ASP.NET Core templates now do show up here, or at least most of them do, the ones, the common ones. In the future, we expect to get them all to show up. So if you want to create a Blazor app, it now shows up in the top level dialog. If you click Next, it will still show you that additional dialog, but it'll be filtered to just the Blazor templates. And then cool. You can get up and going. So that's kind of fun. So that's not just for Blazor, but also if you want to do gRPC, the gRPC template shows up here. Worker service, I believe, also shows up here. Yeah, the new worker service template for doing backend services. All those things are now surfaced in the create new project dialog. Were you saying something, Brady? Did you have something to add to that?
I just wanted you to type worker. That's all.
Oh, yeah, worker. Yeah. One thing that doesn't show up yet is Web API. We got to get that one added. So I think Web API will only highlight, this the ASP.NET Core template. So that's one we still need to add.
Okay.
But Blazor, gRPC, worker, they're all there. All right. What else is new? Going back to the blog post. Okay, yeah. So we made some cleanup to the web templates, and part of this is. A common source of feedback that we get with our template work is we always have this tension, right, between wanting our project templates to be really great sample applications, like showing you how to use new features, how to get functionality into your app, how to get things done. So we often will add features to the templates that add, some more code, some more complexity, but they're cool, and so we want to make them really easy to consume. At the same time, there's a bunch of people who are just want a blank slate. They just want to create a project template and then add the features that they want to the template. And a lot of times with the way we author templates, they end up having to delete a lot of code and remove things that they don't actually need. So we do have, of course, the empty template, which is like a really blank slate. It has like nothing in it. For web app templates, we decided to do a little bit more cleanup. Let me go ahead and create one, and we'll take a look at some of the things that we've basically removed from the template so that it's simpler. One thing that we decided to go ahead and simplify is if we look in the layout file, before for all the like your script references and your static assets, we used to have a bunch of infrastructure in here for setting up using a CDN for when you're running in production, but then using local files in your app when you're in development. And it even had complicated stuff where it would, if the CDN wasn't there were fallback scripts and all this stuff. We've decided to simplify that and just say now, like, we're just going to have the static assets linked to in your application. If you want the infrastructure for having the CDNs used when you're in production and having all the fallback script, we'll have samples and docs to help you set that up. So this got simplified quite a bit. The other thing that got simplified is before we used to have a bunch of code in the templates that we added right around the time that GDPR became a very relevant concern for a bunch of customers. GDPR, of course, is a bunch of regulations around managing the privacy of your application's users. We had added a bunch of code to the template to help people with those concerns. Like we added the cookie consent policy code to the template for you and a corresponding UI. We've decided to go ahead and remove that code from the template by default, but we will have samples and docs if you want to add it back. The features are still there. The underlying framework infrastructure is still there, but we just wanted to clean up the code and make it a lot simpler. So that's why there's now quite a bit less stuff sitting in your startup class. So simplified web app templates.
Is that something that like customers are asking for? They're like, hey, there's too much clutter in here. Or...
Oh yeah, like the common way that this comes up is customers will tell us about all the code that they delete as soon as they create a new project. So they'll file a new project and then they'll delete a bunch of stuff. For us at like us program managers at Microsoft, the tension is always, well, we want those features there because it makes it really easy to demo, right? Like you just file a new project and they're all there and you can show all these cool new things without having to do any work at all. But for folks that are down in the trenches actually trying to write apps, they tell us pretty regularly that a lot of the code that we put in the templates, they just delete. So we're trying to make their lives a little easier since they're the ones that are really using our product on a day-to-day basis to get their job done.
I wonder if we should have a like template, or I don't know, like either a template or just like a demo project to clone that has those like standard features in there. You know what I mean? Just
we like everything in the kitchen sink template that's like here.
Well,
here's
I mean, it doesn't have to go crazy, but a little bit more.
All the pretty bells and with like the demo model at the store, right? Like the fancy car that's like in the front of the parking lot that they want you to get excited about. We have talked about that as well, and that's certainly a possibility. And especially now that it's so easy to author template packs that can then be made to show up in Visual Studio, it should be trivial to do. Like we could just create a NuGet package that has that. Anyone could really do it with demo variants that they really like. Share them on NuGet. Anyone can install them on the command line, and then they should show up in Visual Studio.
And then one other thing that we've talked about doing is creating an experience where it's not just at file a new project. You can actually add this stuff later on, maybe like add puzzle pieces to your application after you've already started coding. So if I want to add Logger, it just dials in Logger wherever I need it, so forth and so on. So
we've started doing some of that already, like with identity. We added the identity scaffolder for folks that wanted to add identity support to their applications after the fact. You've created the project and you're like, oh, darn, I needed identity in this app and I forgot to do it. Well, you can just scaffold it in. So we use scaffolding quite a bit for features like that, and we can certainly do more functionality that way. Like you could imagine maybe scaffolding in the cookie consent UI. Those things are certainly possible.
Cool.
But let us know what you guys think. If for folks that are on the call, like take a look at the new templates. Like we'd love to hear more feedback about what things do you think are useful to have in the template by default, and what things do you think are just honestly noise and you would be happier if they were just removed.
And if we're missing templates, let us know about that too. So.
Yep. Okay, well, we're talking about things I always turn on and change. You know what I mean? Features and stuff. Libman. There's the Libman, like dependencies via Libman. I always like, that's one of the first things I do in a new project is switch over from those like direct dependencies to managing using Libman. Is that something that you think is always going to be like a docs kind of thing, or is that going to be something that the templates would use?
That's actually a great question around the use of. We recently upgraded a site. We'll talk about that later in the show. But what's it called? The client side Bower. So projects that you have that have Bower or that have libman or vice versa. How do you how do you upgrade from Bower to other stuff? I'd like to have something easier to do there. And libman's also sort of complex with certain package names like Angular, ASP.NET, Microsoft, when there's an organization.
Oh, as in it's hard to use it with those particular package names?
I think if there is a trailing @ sign, so if I ask for @ASP.NET, whack !r @next, I think there was an issue that I saw on GitHub with that, but I know the team's working on it, so that's an ongoing thing. But you can always go to the command line. Libman's got a great command line experience too. So.
We have absolutely considered putting libman in the templates by default. There are some really great things that libman does really well, and there are some things that unfortunately make libman a little difficult for us to make the default experience right now. Like I think one of the issues that we hit was like the default provider that libman used didn't support preview packages. So like if we had like a preview version of the SignalR client, for example, that you needed to acquire, the default configuration of libman wasn't friendly to dealing with previews. There was just some rough edges that I think still just need to be polished before libman can become a thing that's just always there and by default. But we listen to the community. If the majority of our customers told us that no, we're using libman and we love it, can you just please add it for me, and that would make my life easier, that would absolutely be something we consider. Right now, I think we find that it's still a select audience that's using libman and finds a lot of value in it, and for other people, that's they're setting up other full client-side build pipelines by installing Node and npm and all those things. So it's a bit of a mix. It could be an option. That's another possibility where if you want it, we could add it. All those things are possible. I think there's still those couple things that we need to follow up with the libman team on just to make sure the experience is really good.
Right.
Cool.
If you have any feedback there, they're definitely listening on GitHub. We were engaged in a conversation with them the other day with a customer, so there's definitely a lot of listening going on. So please keep the feedback coming.
Cool. Okay, so things that are new in the Blazor world, if you're messing around with Blazor, we did add a couple features in this release. One is support for attribute splatting. What is attribute splatting? Well, let's say you have a component. Components in Blazor are represented with elements. And you want to be able to capture not only the explicit parameters that you've defined on a component, but you also want to capture any additional attributes that were added to that component element. And then in your component rendering, you want to have a way to take those captured attributes and splat them wherever they should go in the rendered output. So for an example would be, we actually have components built into Blazor that need this feature. Like we have a bunch of components around doing forms and validation. Like we have an input text component and I think input select and those types of things. Those are components that under the covers are rendering normal HTML input elements. And it'd be really great if you could pass in any additional attributes that are relevant for the rendered input, like you want to specify the placeholder or other things like that. Attribute splatting is a core piece of infrastructure to the Blazor component model that now enables that. So the way this works, to capture all of the additional attributes that are defined on your component, you define a special parameter in your component that has this capture unmatched attributes equals true property set. And then this dictionary will get populated with all the additional attributes that were were basically written on the component element when it was used. And then when you want to use these attributes and render them onto the component output, we've added a new Razor directive, the attributes with an S directive. And that's a way that you can then specify where you want that content to go. And this looks this looks like not, yeah, here it is. Here's the example. So at the top, after you've captured the dictionary on your input, then you use add attributes, and this was where all those attributes will go. It is ordered. So like we'll basically look at the attributes from left to right. So if you had, for example, a type attribute in the additional set of attributes that were passed in to this component. But then, here the component is also specifying itself what type attribute it wants. Then the last one wins. So this one would override. So that's a way that you can now have components that take in additional attributes that get rendered in the output. Does that make sense?
It does. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then for data binding in Blazor, we've historically only supported a fairly limited set of types. You could basically, I think you could data bind to a string in previous releases, an enum, and datetime. I think were the only 3 types that we supported with data binding in Blazor. In this release, we added support for type converters. So now any type that has a string type converter, you can now use with data binding. So and a bunch of the types that are built into the .NET Framework libraries already have type converters like this specified. Like if you wanted to bind to a GUID, you can now just do that without having to do any work because GUID already has a string type converter assigned to it. And if you have other types that you want to use, you can associate type converters with them, and then that will just work. So that's type converters with data binding. And this is supposed to be a C#. I'm still trying to figure out how to get that hash time to show up. So another typo there. We'll get that fixed. Last thing in the Blazor space is I think it was the last release, we introduced this idea of directive attributes. These are attributes that you can apply as part of your component rendering that affect the compilation output. They affect how your .razor files get turned into C#. So event handlers fall in this bucket, bind falls in this bucket, ref, key. We have a whole bunch of attributes that are special in that they impact the compilation output. We introduced that feature in Preview 6 as a standardized syntax for all of your directive attribute scenarios. There were a few places where the expected content of those attributes was a little bit not quite right. Like in Preview 6, if you wanted to specify an event handler, you still had to put this @ sign in front of the method name that you were indicating for that, like this on-click handler in this case. That really shouldn't be necessary because if you're specifying an event handler using a directive attribute, it's pretty obvious that that's going to be C# code. So that attribute shouldn't be, that @ sign shouldn't be needed. So in Preview 7, we've clarified all the cases for directive attributes, which ones are HTML, which ones are C# by default. So that @ sign is no longer needed for all your event handlers. If you have it, it'll still work. It'll just basically get ignored, but it's just one less character that you no longer need to type. And so those are the main things that are new in Blazor. Other things that we're doing in parallel, like we are actually spending a lot of time right now getting Blazor ready for full-time production use. Making sure that Blazor can handle high-stress runs over long periods of time, doing our full security review process with Blazor and going through and making sure that Blazor server apps are secure and what our security guidance is. Doing a lot of work around reliability and scalability, like measuring the memory usage and the CPU usage of server Blazor apps when they're being put under load. So a lot of that work is happening in Preview 7. It's continuing to happen in Preview 8. And things are looking really good, actually. Like we're pretty much wrapping up our security review now. Also the API reviews, I mentioned that. We're wrapping those up. There will be a bunch of API changes that people will need to react to, but this will be the last big change. So that's pretty exciting for us that we're pretty much about ready to lock down the APIs for Preview 8. And then in terms of reliability and stress, it looks like we're the tests that we're seeing where we're taking Blazor apps and running them for hours and hours and hours. Those are looking good. Memory usage is looking good. A few things that we still need to fix up there, but yeah, we're feeling pretty happy about Blazor's readiness to ship in .NET Core 3.0 later this year.
Yep. And scroll down a little bit more because I love this next part, all the different event counters, especially when we get to the signal R part. That's very important to me in my world. It's great that we've added a whole bunch of new event counters so that you have more capability to be able to kind of take a peek at what's going on in your code and being able to instrument things now at a much deeper level. And I think we're getting some comments in the stream. I think it's C / up above, Dan. If you scroll up, I think
he saw
you got it.
No,
okay, cool.
I mentioned
sure.
the markdown parser that we use in our blog engine is super strict about hash signs in the title. So I'm still trying to figure out what the right escape sequence is to get that hash sign to show up so it doesn't think that it's a heading marker. So if anyone knows their markdown really well for those really strict markdown parsers, feel free to suggest what you think this.
Maybe you can use use the Unicode music sharp sign.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I would love that.
The question, do those counters work with Azure App Service? I believe you would see them in the logs. I haven't run a test with some of them. I'll take a peek at that later today. But I believe that you would be able to see those counters popping up, especially if you were to go to the Diagnose and Solve blade and look at the application logs or the event logs. You'll start to see a lot more stuff popping up in there as well, because we've done a lot of work to make it easier for you to diagnose either startup problems or runtime problems whenever you're running on app service. So
this is basically the equivalent of like perf counters that we've always had in Windows and in .NET Framework. But event counters now are basically perf counters that are cross-platform, and they work wherever you're running. You now have these moral equivalent of perf counters, in addition to tooling, it looks like, for viewing and analyzing those counters. So if you install the .NET Counters tool, you can see the counter outputs and see what's going on with your app.
Yep. We're getting asked, like in the charts on App Service, like if you were to go to the charts, I'll definitely take a peek at that. I don't know for sure if we're surfacing all those events up the way we surfaced everything in the perf counter. But if you see here on Dan's screen, you'll actually see .NET Counters, because you could actually, you could do that in your Kudu console. That's not as good. We definitely like to see that in the charts. But I'll follow up with the teams and figure out if we're going to get that. But that's a great question.
Yeah, cool. So this is all the .NET stuff. So it's like CPU usage, allocation rate, total requests. Yes, great. So a bunch of new instrumentation happened here as well, right? Like these are all basically new counters. Cool.
Value, much value. Oh, okay. Let's shift to me real quick.
Okay.
Cool. Let me talk about SignalR real quick. So what I'll do is I'll shift to my screen, first thing I want to pull up here is I want to go ahead and do Control-Shift-T to open up a site on NPM. Most of you SignalR developers know and love this. It's where the ASP.NET Core SignalR stuff lives as of until today. Eventually, we're going to be moving it over here to Microsoft. We talk about this in the blog post. Yeah, we're going to be moving it over here. And the reason why is that we've had some folks in the JavaScript community and in the Java community say, well, when I look over here and I see that it's under ASP.NET, it feels like SignalR is just for ASP.NET. With the Azure SignalR service, it's definitely not just for ASP.NET anymore. So we wanted to kind of mitigate that confusion by putting it under the Microsoft banner. It's not there yet, but yeah.
Everyone can have the benefit of SignalR.
Everyone can have the benefit.
Not just ASP.NET devs.
Exactly. And I don't have the blog post open. Let me pull it up real quick. Dev blogs, go here to ASP.NET. One thing that we talk about in that blog post down below, we're getting asked about EF Core, so I don't have any depth on the EF Core stuff, so we could talk about that here in a moment. So you'll see here that we've also got new customizable hub method authorization. I think it'd be better if I show you this in terms of a demo, because that's what I do. So I'll flip over here to VS Code, and you'll see that I have a chat hub because, you know, Fowler. So I've got a chat hub, and I've got this authorized thing, my authorized attribute, and I've got this new policy, domain restricted. Now that's not a role or a group or even a user. What that is I've actually added a domain restricted policy right here in my startup CS. And the idea behind this is I'll do add policy, I'll give it a name just like your core's policies, and then I'll do policy.requirements.add, and I've got my own custom requirement right over here. And if I flip over to this, you'll see that this requirement, and we talk about this a little bit more deeply in the blog post, that this requirement literally checks the hub method name. So in this case, I can actually come up with a very detailed control over how individual users can actually hit my hub methods. This is a much better control than like roles or users, because now we can get more granular. So what you'll see here is I've got a method. I've got some code. I'd real logic to check for later. Right now, it seems pretty restrictive just for me, because what I want to do is I want to restrict myself from being able to ban users, but I want to make sure that everybody at Microsoft.com that logs into this application can access the view user history. And I've got the browser pulled up twice right here. And you'll see that I'm logged in with my Hotmail account. And if I flip over here, you'll see that I'm logged in with my Brady G account. And anybody can send a message. You'll see here that I'm actually sending messages and we're not getting any errors. Now, if I were to go here and click on review a particular user's history, you see that I'm not getting any errors. If I go over here, now you'll see that I'll be getting errors because this is a Hotmail address. Therefore, he's not going to be allowed to access anything over here. But we're disallowing Brady to ban users because he can get a little ban happy sometimes. So if Brady tries to ban a user here, you'll see that he's actually going to be, disallowed as well. So what you'll see from this is that we have new, policy control. Much better policy control when it comes to SignalR Hub methods. You can get really, really granular. And then the only other thing in the blog post, I'm going to do something really daring here and switch over to a different machine. Hopefully my screen, there you guys. So you'll see that I've got a series of microservices here, and I've got a bunch of worker apps that I've created. And what I'll do is I've already published this one, but this is a brand new feature that we've got in 16.3 that I'm excited about because I like to do a lot of microservice development. I'll go here and I'll click publish. Now, in the past, we only had this Azure Web Jobs feature, which is great. If you want to publish to Azure Web Jobs, they're fantastic. They start running immediately. But what you'll see that our friends in the tooling team have recently added is being able to publish a worker app to either an ACR instance, to create an ACR instance, or to Docker Hub. This is a new feature in 16.3. You had that support for other types of projects, but they recently added it for the worker project, which makes me happy because I like to build a lot of worker apps, as Dan can attest to for our time together on Blazing Pizza for Build.
Because Brady does a lot of work.
He does a lot of work. He's the proletariat. The only other thing I would call out here is if I scroll down, so I just want to make sure you remember this. We're moving from ASP.NET to Microsoft. So update your stuff, and if you depend on us, feel free to reach out to me. I've actually got a list of all the dependents on ASP.NET SignalR, and I'll be reaching out to you.
Is there a way with NPM that you can forward, or deprecate, but link forward to the new one?
There is. I'm glad you asked that question. We had a open issue on GitHub where we had quite a bit of discussion, both from folks in the .NET community and some folks in the JavaScript community. We've got a link to that in the Preview 7 blog post, so if you have any feedback or you want to contribute to that discussion, feel free and pop out there and do that. But we had some great feedback from some of the JavaScript community on how to properly or improperly deprecate or move, et cetera, et cetera. But we went through that entire discussion. It's way beyond the scope of this show. Trust me. So the only other thing I want to call out, I think I'm allowed to talk about this. I'll go over here to the .NET site right here, .NET.Microsoft.com, and I will scroll way down, and you'll see here running on Preview 7. So we're actually running the .NET website on Preview 7 in app service. But I do want to call this out because we started this before the folks were able to get everything out to the Fabric. You can do this today with any SDK. If you use Azure DevOps, for instance, is how we actually set up all of our builds. You'll see here's the build where we actually pull from the GitHub website and build everything. This first step, which I think Mr. Hanselman blogged about once, you can actually specify which version of the .NET SDK you want to use, and it will pull in that SDK to your build agent and build it right out. So you can do that. So if you want to start building on 8 or 9 or Infinity, you can do that with Azure DevOps today. That's been around for quite some time.
Yeah, we do this with the tutorials. Shane Boyer set this up. So we have builds going again because we have, for instance, the app building workshop has 7 different steps in it. Right. And each one of those builds and the entire project builds, and we have different branches for different, we had one for .NET Core 2.1 and now 2.2 and 3.0. Mm-hmm. And so we have CI builds going for each of those using this exact feature.
Cool.
So,
cool.
Really cool.
So that's a great feature. If you want to go ahead and get started with Preview 7 or Preview 8, you can do that today. You can see that we're already doing so. We actually had a lot of fun with it. One of the things that we were able to do, which I was excited about, we had an intern who was going to be on the show today. It's my mission to get him on the show before he goes back to school this summer. But we had, there was a funny conversation where we had a lot of IIS rewrite rules in web config. I think we had 73 of them, something like that. And I'm on a mission to kind of bring all that stuff out of there and just, get it into, .NET Core so I can run everything on my Mac or Linux or in a container. Mr. Lander and I were doing that together. And I talked
where are all those rewrite rules in?
They were in web config in the .NET website code.
Oh, okay.
Because we had been using, I think, 2.0 up to this point. I can't remember what we were on. But what we wanted to do was to kind of bring everything and, do it with .NET Core, idioms. So I talked to two of the gentlemen in the team room, and I said, how would I move this over? And they said, we're the interns that worked on the URL rewrite middleware for ASP.NET Core. We can totally show you how to do it. I was excited to say that it probably took me about 5 minutes to get it installed and deployed. We literally just moved that XML out of web config, loaded them from a separate file according to exactly what the docs say, and it lit right up. It was pretty fantastic. So we got that push in, and it's all running .NET Core Preview 7 now. It's on the .NET website. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yep. So if we can do it, you can do it. So.
Of course, we would expect nothing less. .NET website. Got to be running on the latest, greatest stuff.
You got it. And then I'm looking through to see if we have. Nope, that's the end of the blog post. I don't really have any other content. Do you guys want to talk about anything else, or do any other demos? I know Dan's got to have at least another demo we can do.
Not yet. But working on cool stuff for the release in September.
Cool.
We'll have some cool stuff to show.
Awesome.
Very cool. So you've talked about how to get all the stuff installed, and it's in the blog post here. Mm-hmm. And then if people have issues or feedback, you've got that link down at the bottom of the blog post. Mm-hmm. So I always want to point that out, right? Because everyone sees all this cool new stuff. Part of the reason why we show you this every week, we want you to be able to get involved and to get your features, your feature requests in, get your feedback in, all that. Mm-hmm. So. Mm-hmm.
Preview 8.
Okay.
Boy.
I have a little update, unfortunately.
Oh boy.
It looks like 16.3 Preview 1 is slightly going to be delayed. Be a little bit delayed. So I don't have an ETA exactly yet when it will go out. But it looks like they did hit an issue on release. So if you're messing around with .NET Core 3.0, you can still install the SDK. You can still use of course, the full CLI experience. Most things will still work in Visual Studio with like 16.2 Preview 4, or actually, I think it's 16. Yeah, with 16.2 Preview 4, which is in the should be in the preview channel now. There may be some issues that you might hit just because of incompatibilities there, but for the most part, it should work. But hopefully, we'll have a 16.3 Preview 1 out for you shortly. It's slightly unfortunate, but things sometimes happen. So just FYI, if you're not seeing 16.3 Preview 1 yet in the preview channel, that it looks like there's been a little bit of a delay.
And keep pinging us, Dan. We have a question. Can we get the Blutter source code?
That is a great question. So if people don't know what Blutter is, it's a blue colored butter. No, it's Blutter is this pretty awesome demo that Steve Sanderson did at NDC Oslo not that long ago, like just a few weeks ago, or a month or so ago. And it is a combination of Blazor with Flutter. So Flutter is a UI framework that's been put out by Google based on Dart for doing mobile, desktop, web applications. Using a common UI programming model. And what Steve did is he took Blazor's component model and remapped it onto Flutter's component model. So you can use Blazor, C#, Razor syntax to write Flutter applications as a demo, which was pretty awesome. It was pretty cool, kind of mind blowing. I think it really sort of highlights how flexible the Blazor component model really can be. The code for that is not yet publicly available. I am working on trying to see if we can share that code. Just to be clear, Blazor plus Flutter is not something that we are shipping or something that you should plan using for any of your applications anytime soon. It's just highlighting a pattern and potential future directions that we might take Blazor in the future. So it's not available yet. I hope that we can share that code, but we'll let you know if as soon it is available. Other things that we think about with Blazor, like Blazor currently, the main focus is on web applications, We started out with like running Blazor code directly in the browser on WebAssembly, and then we also paired it with this server-hosted model of Blazor server apps that run server-side over a SignalR connection. We have shown like writing desktop apps with Blazor using Electron, where it's a very similar pattern actually to the Blazor server model, but where the two processes just sort of sit right next to each other. You have a .NET Core process and you have an Electron process, and the Blazor components in the .NET Core process drive the Electron app. So you can write cross-platform desktop apps using WebTech and Blazor. And looking forward, it's certainly possible to think about like doing mobile scenarios with Blazor as well. We
just had a question about that, Blazor for Xamarin Forms.
Yeah, so in the React world, like if you're familiar with React.js, the React folks came out with React Native. It's a very popular platform for building mobile applications, where what they did is they took basically your JSX markup and remapped that to native controls, so you can create native mobile applications written in JavaScript using the React programming model. Such a thing is totally conceivable to do also with Blazor, the same way that Steve mapped Blazor components to Flutter components, or mapped the Razor markup to Flutter components. You can imagine doing a very similar mapping to native Android and iOS components with Blazor. So those are directions. We're still trying to get the web stuff done, so we haven't done a lot of explorations in the mobile space. We have had some conversations with the Xamarin folks, but you could imagine doing something very similar to what Xamarin Forms is. Xamarin Forms does basically the same thing, but based on a XAML programming model. You could imagine taking the same runtime that Xamarin uses, instead of using a XAML-based programming model, using a Blazor-based component model, but mapping in the same way that they do to native UI controls. I've also thought about you could do a hybrid approach. Some mobile applications, instead of rendering to native controls, they render to like a WebView component that lives in the application, and that allows you to reuse a lot more of your UI logic if you already have, web UI assets that you'd like to just reuse in your mobile application. You can imagine having Blazor components running on like the Xamarin model runtime, and then rendering to a WebView, very similar to how you would render to a Chromium shell in an Electron application. These are all things that we're thinking about, and directions that we'd like to go, but one step at a time.
One other thing that came up, questions on the chat, was about what's new with Entity Framework. There is a new blog post that came out right at the same time as the other ones did. That's linked. So I've updated the URL list for today to include the EF post, and then also it's linked in the .NET Teams blog post. So, and some of the top things that they list in Preview 7 are query improvements. So definitely check that out. And it's been a bit. We should get the EF team back on stand up here.
That'd be good.
Yep. Cool.
The query improvements have been a really great improvement to how EF is going to perform. I think you're going to be happy when you start trying the new stuff out. The team's been really, really hard at work on it, so that'd be great.
Cool.
It'd be good to get that out.
All right. Well, I think that wraps up this show. This has been amazing. A lot of excitement, great chat. We had a ton of people showing up today, which is cool as we're getting closer to release. So that is great. Thank you, Brady and Dan.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone. Have fun with Preview 7.
Thanks a lot. Have fun with 7.
Thanks, folks. Okay, Brady, one of those buttons will end the thing, and I don't know what all the other buttons do. Good luck.
Take care. Have fun, everybody. Have fun with Preview 7.
Bye.